of the vehicle.
I don't understand.
I don't know what's
You're
going on.
calling 911?
They're harassing me. I don't understand. Please.
Get out of the car. No.
Sir, we got it.
Out of the car, ma'am.
Oh my God, don't touch me.
Get out of the car. Hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
I can't do anything. I don't understand.
Stop resisting.
Please.
Put your hands behind your back.
Is your body camera on?
100%.
Your body cam on? Yes. So you just take me like that for no reason?
Because you were resisting.
A
A routine traffic stop for a rolling violation suddenly shifts from a tense exchange about compliance to a violent physical struggle involving a taser and a desperate 911 call from a woman pleading for help while still seated in her vehicle. The scene is set with Detective Anthony Briggs explaining a simple traffic violation, a failure to stop completely at an intersection. The atmosphere is initially professional, but grows increasingly tense when Monique Harris's hands begin trembling on the steering wheel and her voice becomes defensive. What starts as a standard request for license and registration transforms when the detective asks her to step out of the vehicle, a lawful command that Monique questions rather than obeys. Her passenger, Terrence Lewis, immediately complies and exits, but Monique freezes, her fear overriding her judgment. "Why do I need to get out?" she asks, her voice rising. "I didn't do anything wrong." The detective repeats the order. She refuses. Backup is called. Officer Paul Donnelly arrives, escalating the visible show of authority. Monique, now visibly shaking, pulls out her phone to call for help, narrating the encounter in real time while still seated in the driver's seat, one hand raised defensively, the other clutching the phone to her ear. The officers warn her repeatedly. This is a lawful order, not a request. Terrence pleads with her to comply. But Monique's distrust runs too deep, her fear too overwhelming. She believes compliance will lead to harm, not safety. "Ma'am, this is your final warning," Detective Briggs says, his voice firm. "Step out now or you will be forcibly removed and arrested." "Please," she whispers into the phone, tears forming. "I'm so scared. They won't tell me why." "I don't know what's happening." The officers move toward the door. Monique pulls back, and in that instant, a routine traffic stop transforms into a violent confrontation that will be recorded, shared, judged by millions, and fought over in a courtroom for months to come. Detective Briggs stood beside the driver's window, his notepad in hand. He had already written down Monique's license number and the details from her registration. Everything seemed normal enough. A simple rolling stop, a quick ticket, maybe a warning if she was polite. But something about the way Monique gripped the steering wheel made him pause. Her knuckles were turning white. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you and your passenger to step out of the vehicle for me," he said, his voice steady and firm. Terrence, sitting in the passenger seat, didn't hesitate. He knew how these things worked. He reached for the door handle immediately, ready to comply. But Monique didn't move. She stared straight ahead through the windshield, her breathing quick and shallow. Her hand stayed frozen on the wheel. "Ma'am?" Detective Briggs repeated, leaning down slightly to make eye contact. "Did you hear me? I need you to step out of the car." Monique's eyes shifted toward him. They were wide, filled with something between confusion and fear. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The detective's expression didn't change. "Because I'm asking you to." "But I don't understand," Monique said, her voice getting stronger now, edged with panic. "I gave you my license. I gave you my registration. Why do I have to get out?" Terrence had already opened his door and was stepping onto the pavement. He looked back at Monique, his face tense. "Monique, just do what he says," he urged quietly. But she shook her head, her curly hair swaying slightly. No, I want to know why first. I have a right to know." Detective Briggs straightened up, resting his hand on his belt near his radio. This was going in a direction he didn't like. "Ma'am, during a traffic stop, I have the authority to ask you to exit your vehicle. You don't have the option to refuse." "I'm not refusing," Monique said quickly, though her body language said otherwise. She was still gripping the wheel, still planted in her seat. "I just want to understand what's happening. You pulled me over for not stopping. Fine. I showed you my papers. So why do I need to get out?" The detective's jaw tightened. He had done this 1,000 times before. Usually people just got out. They might grumble or roll their eyes, but they got out. This was different. "Ma'am, I'm not going to debate this with you," he said, his tone hardening. "This is a lawful order. Step out of the vehicle, now." Monique's breathing quickened. Her eyes darted from the detective to Terrence, who was standing outside now, hands visible, looking worried. "Monique, please," Terrence said again, his voice low and urgent. "Just get out. Don't make this worse." But Monique felt trapped. Her mind was racing. Why did he want her out? Was he going to search the car? Was he looking for a reason to arrest her? She had seen the videos. She had heard the stories. Black women pulled over for nothing, then things spiraling out of control. Her heart pounded in her chest. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said, her voice cracking now. "I don't understand why you're doing this." Detective Briggs took a step back and reached for his radio. 50 to dispatch. I need a unit for backup on this stop. Drivers refusing to comply. The words crackled through the radio, and Monique's eyes went even wider. "I'm not refusing," she protested, though she still hadn't moved. "I just want to know why." "Ma'am, last chance," the detective said, his voice cold now. "Exit the vehicle or you will be removed by force and placed under arrest for resisting." Terrence put his hands on top of his head, a gesture of complete surrender, and looked at Monique through the windshield. His eyes were pleading. "Just do it," his expression said. "Don't fight this." But Monique's fear had transformed into something else now. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was defiance. She wasn't going to let them push her around. She wasn't going to be another statistic. Her hand moved slowly toward her purse, fishing for her phone. Detective Briggs saw the movement and tensed. "Ma'am, keep your hands where I can see them," he commanded sharply. "I'm getting my phone," Monique said, her voice shaking but determined. "I'm calling someone. I need a witness." The detective's hand moved closer to his belt, put the phone down and exit the vehicle. But Monique was already dialing. Monique's fingers trembled as she pressed the numbers on her phone screen. 911. Her other hand stayed raised, palm out toward Detective Briggs as if that small gesture could keep him at bay. The phone rang once, twice. "Ma'am, I'm telling you right now, hang up that phone and step out of the vehicle," Detective Briggs said, his voice sharp and commanding. Monique shook her head, pressing the phone harder against her ear. She needed someone else to hear this, someone who wasn't a cop standing at her window, someone who could help her make sense of what was happening. 911, what's your emergency?" A calm female voice answered. "Yes, hi. I need help," Monique said quickly, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I'm being pulled over right now, and the officer is trying to make me get out of my car, and I don't know why. I gave him my license and registration and everything, but he won't tell me why I have to get out." Detective Briggs leaned closer to the window. "Ma'am, you are speaking to 911 dispatch. I am a police officer. You're already speaking to law enforcement. Hang up the phone." But Monique ignored him, her focus entirely on the voice in her ear. "Ma'am, where are you located?" the dispatcher asked, her tone professional and measured. "I'm on Maple Street, near the corner of 5th Avenue, Monique said. "There's a detective here, and he's telling me to get out, but he won't say why. I'm scared. I don't understand what's happening." Terrence stood outside the car, watching helplessly. He wanted to reach through the window and take the phone from her hand, to make her see that this was only making things worse. But he stayed frozen, hands still visible, not wanting to give the officer any reason to see him as a threat. "Ma'am, if an officer has pulled you over and is giving you instructions, you need to follow those instructions," the dispatcher said calmly. "The officer has the authority to ask you to step out of your vehicle during a traffic stop. But why?" Monique's voice rose, frustration bleeding through the fear. "Nobody will tell me why." Detective Briggs's patience was wearing thin. He could see another patrol car approaching in his side mirror. Officer Donnelly. Good. He needed backup for this. "Ma'am, the dispatcher is correct," he said firmly. "You are required by law to comply with my orders. This is not optional. Hang up the phone and exit the vehicle immediately." Monique's eyes filled with tears. She had called 911 thinking they would help her, that they would tell this officer he was wrong, that he couldn't just order her around without a reason. But instead, the dispatcher was siding with him. "I just want to know why," she said into the phone, her voice breaking. "Can you ask him why, please?" The dispatcher's voice remained steady. "Ma'am, the officer doesn't need to provide you with a reason during the stop. You can ask questions later, But right now, you need to comply with his instructions for your own safety. For my safety? Monique repeated, her voice getting louder. How is this for my safety? There's 2 of them now, and they're surrounding my car, and I don't even know what I did. Officer Donnelly had arrived and was walking toward the passenger side of the vehicle. He looked at Terrence, who was still standing with his hands visible, clearly not part of the problem. What's the situation? Officer Donnelly asked Detective Briggs. Driver's refusing to exit. She's on the phone with 911 right now, Briggs replied, his tone clipped. Officer Donnelly moved closer to the driver's side window, positioning himself behind Detective Briggs. Now, there were 2 uniformed officers standing at Monique's door, and the sight of them made her heart race even faster. Ma'am, I'm Officer Donnelly, the second officer said, his voice firm but not unkind. I need you to end that phone call and step out of the vehicle. This doesn't have to be difficult. I'm on the phone with 911, Monique said, as if that shield of authority would protect her. I'm telling them what's happening. We are 911, Detective Briggs said, his frustration clear now. You're talking to a dispatcher who's telling you the exact same thing I'm telling you. Hang up and get out of the car. Monique looked at Terrence through the windshield, her eyes desperate and pleading. Help me, her expression said. Tell them I'm not doing anything wrong. But Terrence could only shake his head slowly, his face tight with worry. The dispatcher's voice came through the phone again. Ma'am, you need to cooperate with the officers. I can't help you if you don't follow their instructions. Monique felt the world closing in around her. Everyone was telling her the same thing, but none of it felt safe. None of it felt right. Officer Paul Donnelly wasn't a large man, but his presence made the space around Monique's car feel smaller. He moved with the practiced ease of someone who had done this many times before, positioning himself on the driver's side just behind Detective Briggs. Now Monique could see 2 dark uniforms, 2 badges, 2 officers blocking her door. The phone was still pressed against her ear, but the dispatcher had gone quiet, probably listening to see what would happen next. Ma'am, my name is Officer Paul Donnelly, he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of authority that made it clear he expected to be obeyed. I'm going to ask you one time to end that phone call and step out of the vehicle. Can you do that for me? Monique's eyes darted between the 2 officers. Detective Briggs stood with his arms crossed now, his jaw tight. Officer Donnelly had his hand resting casually on his belt, near his radio and his other equipment. The message was clear even without words. This was serious. This was escalating. I don't understand why there's 2 of you now, Monique said, her voice shaking. I didn't do anything. I just didn't come to a complete stop. That's it. Why do you need backup for that? Officer Donnelly exchanged a glance with Detective Briggs. They had both seen this before. A simple stop that should have taken 5 minutes was now stretching past 10, and they were no closer to resolving it. Ma'am, the reason there's 2 of us is because you're not following instructions, Officer Donnelly explained, his tone still measured. When a driver refuses to comply, we call for backup. That's standard procedure. Now I'm asking you nicely, please step out of the car. Terrence shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his hands still raised slightly. He caught Monique's eye through the windshield and mouthed the words, "Please, just do it." But Monique felt like she was being cornered. The 2 officers standing at her door, the way they positioned themselves so close to the car, blocking any clear path if she did try to exit. It all felt wrong. It all felt dangerous. I'm staying on the phone, she said, her voice firmer now, though it still trembled. I have a right to have a witness. You have a witness, Detective Briggs said, nodding toward Terrence. Your passenger is right there, and we have body cameras recording everything. You don't need to be on the phone. Officer Donnelly took a small step closer to the car. The movement was subtle, but Monique noticed. The space between her and the officers was shrinking. Ma'am, I want you to understand something, Officer Donnelly said, his voice dropping lower, more serious. Right now, you're making this harder than it needs to be. All we're asking is for you to step out. That's it. We're not searching you. We're not arresting you. We just need you to exit the vehicle so we can complete this stop safely. Then why won't you tell me why? Monique demanded, her frustration breaking through the fear. If it's so simple, just tell me why I have to get out. Detective Briggs uncrossed his arms and leaned down to her eye level. Because I said so. That's why. During a traffic stop, I have the legal authority to order you out of the car. I don't need a reason beyond that. Pennsylvania versus Mims. Look it up later. But right now, you need to comply. Monique had never heard of Pennsylvania versus Mims. She had no idea what that meant. All she knew was that two police officers were standing at her door, their voices getting harder, their body language getting more tense. And she was sitting in her car with nowhere to go. Officer Donnelly straightened up and looked at Detective Briggs. How do you want to handle this? The question hung in the air like a threat. Detective Briggs pulled his radio from his belt. I'm going to give her one more chance. If she doesn't comply, we remove her. Monique's breath caught in her throat. Remove her. The words sounded cold and final. Ma'am, Officer Donnelly said, his voice taking on a formal tone now. This is your final warning. If you do not exit this vehicle in the next 10 seconds, you will be forcibly removed and placed under arrest for resisting an officer. Do you understand? The dispatcher's voice crackled through Monique's phone. Ma'am, you need to comply with the officer's instructions. Even the person she had called for help was telling her to give in. Monique looked down at her hands. They were shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone steady. 10 seconds. Detective Briggs looked at his watch, then back at Monique. The 10 seconds he had given her were almost up, and she still hadn't moved. She sat frozen in the driver's seat, phone pressed to her ear, one hand raised defensively, her eyes wide and glistening with tears. Time's up, he said flatly. Monique's mouth opened, but no words came out at first. Her breath was coming in short, quick gasps now, like she couldn't get enough air. Please, she finally managed to say. Please just tell me what I did wrong. I'll get out if you just explain it to me. But Detective Briggs was done explaining. He had asked nicely. He had given warnings. He had offered her multiple chances to comply. In his mind, she had made her choice. Ma'am, you are under arrest for resisting an officer, he said, his voice hard and official now. Put the phone down and place your hands on the steering wheel. The words hit Monique like a physical blow. Under arrest. She wasn't getting a ticket anymore. She wasn't going to be let off with a warning. She was being arrested. No, 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 she said quickly, shaking her head. I'm not resisting. I'm just asking questions. That's not resisting. You were given a lawful order to exit the vehicle, Detective Briggs said, stepping closer to the door. You refused. That is the definition of resisting. Officer Donnelly moved in tighter as well, positioning himself so that if the door opened, Monique would have nowhere to go except toward them. The space around the car felt suffocating now, like the air itself was getting thinner. I have the right to know why? Monique's voice was rising, panic taking over completely now. You can't just arrest me for asking why. I can, and I am, Detective Briggs said. He reached for the door handle. Terrence took a step forward, his hand still raised. Officers, please, she's scared. She doesn't understand. Just give her a minute to. Sir, step back. Officer Donnelly cut him off sharply. This doesn't involve you. Stay where you are. Terrence froze, his face filled with helpless frustration. He wanted to do something, say something that would make this stop spiraling out of control, but he knew that if he pushed any further, they might arrest him too. Monique was still on the phone with 911, though she had stopped talking to the dispatcher. The phone had become something to hold on to, a lifeline to the outside world, proof that someone else was listening. Ma'am, I'm opening this door, Detective Briggs said, his hand now firmly on the handle. When I do, you're going to put the phone down and place your hands behind your back. If you resist, we will use force. Do you understand? Monique's whole body was shaking now. She understood the words he was saying, but they didn't make sense. How had this happened? How had a simple traffic stop turned into this? I'm not resisting, she said again, but her voice was barely a whisper now. Then prove it, Detective Briggs said. Put the phone down and show me your hands. But Monique couldn't let go of the phone. It felt like the only thing keeping her connected to safety, to help, to anyone who might stop this from happening. I'm scared, she said, and this time she wasn't talking to the officers. She was talking to the dispatcher, to Terrence, to anyone who might be listening. I'm so scared. I don't know what to do. Detective Briggs pulled the door handle. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. The boundary between inside and outside, between safety and danger, had been crossed. Monique pulled back instinctively, pressing herself against the center console as far from the open door as she could get. "Don't touch me," she cried out, her voice breaking. "Please don't touch me." Officer Donnelly moved to the passenger side, looking through the window to make sure she didn't try to escape out the other door. She was boxed in now, completely surrounded. "Last chance," Detective Briggs said, standing in the open doorway. "Hands behind your back. Now." Monique's hand gripped the phone tighter. Her other hand was still raised, palm out, shaking violently. "I didn't do anything," she sobbed. Detective Briggs reached into the car. The moment Detective Briggs's hand entered the vehicle, everything changed. What had been Monique's space, her car, her sanctuary, suddenly became a trap. There was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. His hand went for her arm, the one holding the phone. "No!" Monique screamed, jerking away from his grip. She pulled back hard, her shoulder slamming against the center console. "Don't touch me! Get away from me! Stop resisting!" Detective Briggs shouted back, reaching in further. His other hand grabbed the door frame for leverage as he leaned into the car. Officer Donnelly moved quickly to the passenger side and opened that door too. Now both sides of the car were exposed, both officers closing in. "Ma'am, give me your hands," Officer Donnelly commanded from the other side. But Monique was pure panic now. Her brain had stopped processing commands. All she could feel was hands grabbing at her, pulling at her, invading her space. She twisted and pulled, trying to keep her arms away from them, the phone still clutched in her right hand. "Stop fighting us!" Detective Briggs said, his voice strained with effort. He had a grip on her left arm now and was pulling her toward the driver's side door. "I'm not fighting," Monique cried, even as her body did exactly that. Every instinct she had was telling her to get away, to protect herself, to not let them take her. "Let go of me. You're hurting me." Terrence watched in horror from where he stood on the sidewalk, his hands on top of his head now. "Monique, stop. Just stop moving," he yelled, his voice desperate. But she couldn't hear him. She couldn't hear anything except her own heartbeat pounding in her ears and her own voice screaming. Officer Donnelly grabbed her right arm, the one with the phone, and tried to pry her fingers open. "Drop the phone." "No, I need it. Someone help me." Monique's voice was raw now, breaking with each word. Detective Briggs pulled harder, dragging her body toward the open driver's side door. Her legs tangled in the seatbelt. Her purse fell to the floor. Papers scattered everywhere. "You're under arrest," Detective Briggs said again, as if saying it louder would make her stop struggling. "Stop resisting or we will tase you." The word tase cut through Monique's panic for just a second. Tase, electric shock, pain. She had seen videos of people being tased, their bodies going rigid, collapsing. "Please don't," she begged, her voice hoarse. "Please, I'll get out. I'll get out." But it was too late for that. She was already halfway out of the car, her body twisted awkwardly, one foot still caught in the vehicle, while the officers pulled her the rest of the way onto the pavement. "Hands behind your back," Officer Donnelly ordered. Monique tried to comply, but her arms wouldn't cooperate. They were shaking too badly, and she still had the phone. She couldn't let go of the phone. "Drop it," Detective Briggs said, his patience completely gone now. When she didn't, he grabbed her wrist and squeezed hard until her fingers opened involuntarily. The phone clattered to the ground, the dispatcher's voice still coming through the speaker, tiny and distant. "No," Monique sobbed, watching her only lifeline fall away. Both officers moved quickly now, forcing her arms behind her back. She felt the cold metal of handcuffs closing around one wrist, then the other. The click of the locks sounded final, like a door slamming shut on any chance she had of making this stop. "You're under arrest for resisting an officer and battery on a law enforcement officer," Detective Briggs said, breathing hard from the struggle. "Battery?" Monique's voice was barely audible through her sobs. "I didn't hit anyone. I didn't do anything." But they weren't listening anymore. They had her in handcuffs now, and that was all that mattered. Monique was on her feet now, but barely. The officers held her arms tightly, one on each side, keeping her upright as her legs threatened to give out beneath her. The handcuffs bit into her wrists, cold and unyielding. "Walk," Detective Briggs commanded, starting to guide her toward the patrol car. But Monique's body wouldn't cooperate. Her legs felt like they were made of water. She stumbled, her weight pulling against the officer's grip. "I can't," she gasped. "I can't breathe. Please, I can't." "You can walk," Officer Donnelly said firmly. "Come on, let's go." They pulled her forward, and Monique tried to plant her feet, tried to stop moving. Not because she wanted to resist, but because everything was happening too fast and her brain couldn't keep up. She needed a moment, just one moment to understand what was happening. "Stop pulling away," Detective Briggs said, his grip tightening on her arm. "I'm not," Monique cried, but even as she said it, she was twisting in their grasp, trying to turn back toward her car, toward Terrence, toward anything familiar. Her elbow connected with Detective Briggs's chest. Not hard, not intentionally, just a desperate, reflexive movement of someone who was drowning in panic. But it was enough. "She just hit me," Detective Briggs said, his voice sharp. "Did you see that? She struck me." "I didn't mean to." Monique's words came out in a rush. "I wasn't trying to hit you. I'm just scared." Officer Donnelly's hand moved to his belt, to the yellow and black device holstered there. "The taser." "Ma'am, stop resisting right now or you will be tased," he said, his voice cold and official. "This is your final warning." Monique's eyes went wide when she saw the taser in his hand. "No, please, please don't. I'll stop moving." But her body betrayed her words. She was still pulling, still twisting, unable to control the panic that had taken over completely. "Get down on the ground," Detective Briggs ordered, pushing down on her shoulders. "I'm trying," Monique sobbed, but with her hands cuffed behind her back, she couldn't break her fall. She couldn't protect herself. "Last warning," Officer Donnelly repeated, raising the taser. "Don't," Terrence shouted from where he stood. "She's not fighting you. She's just scared." But the officers weren't listening to him. Monique saw the taser pointed at her chest. She saw Officer Donnelly's finger on the trigger. And in that split second, she knew what was coming. Please, God. The taser fired. The sound was sharp and mechanical, like a firecracker. Two small probes shot out, trailing thin wires behind them, and buried themselves in Monique's chest. Then the electricity hit. Her entire body went rigid. Every muscle locked up at once, contracting violently. She couldn't scream. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't do anything except feel the unbearable current surging through her. It lasted 5 seconds, but it felt like forever. When it stopped, Monique collapsed. Her legs gave out completely, and she would have hit the pavement face first if the officers hadn't been holding her. They lowered her down, not gently, until she was on her knees. "Get on the ground," Detective Briggs commanded. "All the way down." But Monique couldn't move. Her body was still twitching from the shock, her muscles refusing to respond. Drool ran from the corner of her mouth. Her vision was blurry. "I said get down." He pushed her shoulder, and she fell sideways onto the pavement, unable to catch herself with her hands still cuffed behind her back. The concrete was rough against her cheek. She could taste blood in her mouth. She had bitten her tongue when the electricity hit. "Please," she whispered, the word barely audible. "Please stop." But Officer Donnelly wasn't done. He saw her still moving, still trying to shift her body, and he interpreted it as continued resistance. "She's still not complying," he said to Detective Briggs, and he pulled the trigger again. The second shock tore through Monique's body like lightning. She screamed this time, a raw, animal sound of pure agony. Her back arched, her fingers clawed uselessly at the air behind her. When it stopped, she went completely limp. Monique lay on the ground, her body trembling uncontrollably. The pavement was cold and hard beneath her cheek. Small pieces of gravel pressed into her skin. She could hear voices above her, the officers talking, but the words didn't make sense. Everything sounded muffled and distant, like she was underwater. "Roll over," someone said. Detective Briggs, maybe. Or Officer Donnelly. She couldn't tell anymore. She tried to move, but her body wouldn't listen. The electricity had scrambled all her signals. Her muscles twitched and spasmed randomly. "I said roll over." The voice was sharper now, impatient. Hands grabbed her shoulders and rolled her onto her stomach. Her face pressed against the pavement. The handcuffs dug deeper into her wrists as her arms were pulled at an awkward angle behind her back. "Please," she whispered into the concrete. "It hurts." "Stop resisting and it won't hurt," Detective Briggs said. his knee pressing into her back to keep her down. "I'm not," Monique sobbed, but even crying hurt. Everything hurt. Her chest where the taser probes had hit, her wrists where the metal cut into her skin, her face pressed against the rough ground, her dignity crushed beneath the weight of 2 police officers and the growing crowd of neighbors who had come out to watch. She could hear Terrence's voice somewhere nearby, strained and worried. "Is she okay? You didn't have to tase her twice. She wasn't fighting." "Sir, step back," Officer Donnelly warned. "This doesn't concern you." "She's my friend. Of course it concerns me." "Step back now, or you'll be arrested too." The threat worked. Terrence went quiet, though Monique could still sense him there, watching helplessly. Detective Briggs pulled her arms, checking the handcuffs to make sure they were secure. They were too secure. The metal was so tight it was cutting off circulation. Monique's fingers were starting to go numb. "Can you loosen them?" she asked, her voice small and broken. "Please, they're too tight." "They're fine," Detective Briggs said dismissively. They weren't fine. Nothing was fine. Officer Donnelly was talking into his radio now, his voice official and detached. "Suspect in custody. Used taser twice due to active resistance. Requesting transport." Suspect? That's what she was now. Not Monique Harris, 28-year-old woman who worked at the bank and volunteered at the community center on weekends. Not a daughter, a friend, a person. Just a suspect. "What are you charging her with?" Terrence called out, his voice cracking. Detective Briggs looked up from where he was kneeling on Monique's back. "Resisting arrest and battery on a law enforcement officer. Maybe more once we get to the station." "Battery?" Terrence sounded incredulous. "She didn't hit anyone." "Her elbow struck my chest during the struggle," Detective Briggs said calmly, as if he were reading from a script. "That's battery. It's all on the body camera." Monique wanted to protest, to explain that it was an accident, that she hadn't meant to touch him at all. But she couldn't form the words. Her mouth wouldn't work properly. Everything felt disconnected, like her mind was floating somewhere above her body, watching all of this happen to someone else. More police cars were arriving now. She could hear the sirens, see the flashing red and blue lights, even with her eyes mostly closed. More witnesses to her humiliation. "Can she breathe like that?" a new voice asked, one of the other officers who had just arrived. "She's fine," Detective Briggs said. But he eased up slightly on her back, just enough that Monique could take a deeper breath. The air tasted like dust and blood and defeat. A few minutes later, different hands pulled her up to a sitting position. Her vision swam. Her head felt too heavy for her neck. "Can you walk?" Officer Donnelly asked. Monique tried to nod, but even that small movement made her dizzy. They hauled her to her feet. Her legs wobbled, barely holding her weight. She would have fallen if they weren't gripping her arms. They walked her toward a patrol car, its back door already open, waiting to swallow her whole. This was real. This was actually happening. She was going to jail. The police station was bright and cold and smelled like industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making Monique's headache worse. Her body still ached from the taser shocks, a deep bone-level pain that wouldn't go away. They led her through a secure door, past other officers who barely glanced at her, down a hallway with beige walls and scuffed floors. Her hands were still cuffed behind her back, making every step awkward. She stumbled once, and Officer Donnelly caught her arm roughly. "Watch your step," he said, as if she had tripped on purpose. They stopped at a desk where a woman in uniform sat behind a computer, looking bored. She had short gray hair and reading glasses that hung on a chain around her neck. "What do we have?" she asked, not looking up from her screen. "Female, 28, Detective Briggs said, consulting his notes. "Monique Harris, resisting arrest with violence, battery on a law enforcement officer, 2 counts." The woman finally looked up, her eyes settling on Monique with practiced indifference. She had seen 1,000 people come through here, and Monique was just one more. "2 counts?" the booking officer asked. "She struck me during the arrest, and she struck Officer Donnelly when we were trying to secure her on the ground," Detective Briggs explained. "I didn't." Monique started to protest, but her voice came out weak and hoarse. "You'll have a chance to tell your side to the judge," the booking officer said flatly. "Right now, I need you to answer some questions." 3 days after her arrest, Monique sat in a small conference room at her public defender's office. Her wrists still had faint bruises from the handcuffs, purple and yellow marks that she tried to hide under long sleeves. She hadn't been able to sleep much since that day. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the electricity again, heard her own screams, saw the pavement rushing toward her face. Her lawyer, a tired-looking woman named Sarah Chen, sat across from her with a stack of papers and a laptop. "I've reviewed the police report," Sarah said, pushing her glasses up her nose, "and I've requested the bodycam footage. The prosecutor should have it by now, too." Monique nodded numbly. She had already told her story 3 times, to her parents, to Sarah, to herself, over and over in the dark hours of the night, trying to understand where it had all gone wrong. "The charges are serious," Sarah continued. 2 counts of battery on a law enforcement officer, resisting arrest with violence, and misuse of the 911 system. "I didn't misuse 911, Monique said quietly. "I was scared. I needed help." "I know," Sarah said, her voice softening slightly. "And that's something we can argue. But the other charges, they're going to be harder." Across town, in the district attorney's office, ADA Michael Crawford sat at his desk watching the bodycam footage for the 3rd time. He had prosecuted hundreds of cases, but something about this one bothered him. He watched as Detective Briggs pulled over Monique's car, watched the initial conversation about the stop sign, watched Monique's hands shake as she handed over her license, watched her face when the officer asked her to step out, the confusion and fear clear even through the camera. He paused the video and rubbed his eyes. The 911 call. That was the part that didn't sit right with him. He clicked forward, listening to Monique's voice on the phone. "I'm being pulled over and the officer is trying to make me get out of my car and I don't know why. I'm scared." Crawford leaned back in his chair. She sounded terrified. Not defiant. Not malicious. Just terrified. The statute for misuse of 911 required that the call be made with intent to harass, annoy, or alarm. It was meant for people who called 911 as a prank, or to make false reports, or to waste emergency resources. Was that what Monique had done? Crawford played the audio again. "I need help. There's a detective here and he's telling me to get out, but he won't say why. I'm scared. I don't understand what's happening." He picked up his phone and called Detective Briggs. "Briggs," the detective answered on the 2nd ring. "It's Crawford. I'm reviewing the Harris case. Tell me about the 911 call." There was a pause on the other end. "She called 911 while we were trying to get her out of the car. Refused to hang up even after we told her we were law enforcement." "Did she make any false statements to the dispatcher?" Crawford asked. "No, but did she claim you were doing something you weren't doing?" Another pause. "Not exactly, but she was using the call to delay compliance." Crawford made a note on his legal pad. "That's not the same as misuse under the statute." "Are you saying you're not going to charge it?" "I'm saying I don't have probable cause," Crawford replied. The call was made from a legitimate fear for her safety. Whether that fear was reasonable or not is a different question, but it doesn't meet the threshold for criminal misuse of emergency services. Detective Briggs didn't sound happy. "She called 911 on 911. That's ridiculous." "Maybe so," Crawford said, "but ridiculous isn't illegal. I'm dropping that charge." When Monique got the call from Sarah 2 hours later, she was folding laundry at her parents' house. She had moved back in after posting bail. She couldn't afford her apartment anymore, not with the legal fees and the fact that she'd been suspended from her job pending the outcome of the case. "They're dropping the 911 charge," Sarah said, and for the first time in days, there was something almost like good news in her voice. Monique sat down hard on her bed, a towel clutched in her hands. "Really?" "The prosecutor said there wasn't probable cause. He reviewed the footage and determined your call was made out of genuine fear, not malicious intent. 1 charge gone, out of 4. "What about the others?" Monique asked, though she already knew the answer. "Those are still active," Sarah said gently. "The resisting charge and both battery charges. We'll fight them, but it's going to be an uphill battle." Monique looked down at the bruises on her wrists. 1 charge dropped. 3 to go. It felt like a tiny victory in a war she was already losing. The calendar on Monique's phone showed January 2026. 14 months had passed since that terrible day on Maple Street. 14 months of court dates, continuances, motions, and sleepless nights. 14 months of living in legal limbo, her future suspended in the air like a question no one could answer. She sat in Sarah Chen's office again. But Sarah wasn't her lawyer anymore. The public defender's office had too many cases, and Sarah had been reassigned. Monique's new attorney was a man named David Price, younger than Sarah, with nervous energy and a habit of tapping his pen against his notepad. "We have a new trial date," David said, looking at his computer screen. "February 24th, 2026. That's docket day. Both sides will tell the judge if we're ready to go to trial, if we need more time, or if we've reached a plea agreement." "I'm not taking a plea," Monique said firmly. She had said it before, and she would keep saying it. "I didn't do anything wrong." David looked at her carefully. "Monique, I need you to understand what you're facing. If you go to trial and lose, you could be looking at jail time. Battery on a law enforcement officer is a felony. 2 counts means—" "I know what it means," Monique interrupted, "but I didn't hit anyone. Not on purpose. I was scared, and I was trying to get away from them, and my elbow touched one of them. That's not battery. That's not a crime. The prosecution will argue that any unwanted physical contact during a lawful arrest constitutes battery," David explained, not unkindly. "They have it on Bodycam, your elbow hitting Detective Briggs's chest, your hand making contact with Officer Donnelly when they were trying to restrain you." Monique felt her chest tighten. She had watched the Bodycam footage herself, forced to sit through it during discovery. Watching herself scream, watching herself get tased, watching herself fall to the ground. It was like watching a stranger, someone she barely recognized. "What about the use of force?" she asked. "They tased me twice. Doesn't that matter?" "We're building that argument," David said. "The defense will focus on whether the force was excessive given that you were already handcuffed when they deployed the taser the second time. We're deposing witnesses now, people who saw what happened. We're getting expert testimony on the effects of tasers and whether the officers followed proper protocol." "But it takes time," Monique said flatly. "Yes, it takes time." Time. That was all she had now. Time stretching out endlessly before her, filled with uncertainty. She had lost her job at the bank. They said it was a layoff, but she knew better. She was working part-time at a grocery store now, scanning items and bagging groceries, trying not to make eye contact with customers who might recognize her from the news. The video had gone viral, of course. Millions of views. Comment sections full of people arguing about whether she deserved what happened. Some said she should have just complied. Others said the officers used excessive force. Everyone had an opinion about her life, her choices, her trauma. "What are the chances we win at trial?" Monique asked quietly. David set down his pen and looked at her directly. "Honestly, it's hard to say. Juries are unpredictable. Some will see a scared woman who made a mistake. Others will see someone who refused to follow police orders and suffered the consequences. A lot will depend on the jury we get, the judge we get, and how well we can present your side of the story. So it's a gamble." "Everything's a gamble," David said. "But I believe in your case. I think we have strong arguments about the excessive force, about your state of mind, about the fact that you weren't a threat to anyone." Monique stood up and walked to the window. Outside, people were going about their normal lives, driving to work, meeting friends for lunch, living without felony charges hanging over their heads. "February 24th, she said, more to herself than to David. "February 24th, he confirmed. "We'll meet at the courthouse. Both sides will present their positions to the judge. If the prosecution isn't ready, we might get another continuance. If they are, we'll have to decide, trial or plea." Monique turned to face him. "Trial. I want a trial." David nodded slowly. "Then we'll prepare for trial. I'll keep deposing witnesses. We'll review every frame of that Bodycam footage. We'll build the strongest defense we can. And then what?" "And then," David said, "a jury of your peers will decide your future." Monique walked out of the office into the cold January air. February 24th, 1 month away. 1 month until she would stand before a judge and find out if her case would finally move forward, or if there would be more waiting, more delays, more time suspended in this awful limbo. She pulled her coat tighter and headed toward the bus stop. Somewhere across town, ADA Michael Crawford was preparing the state's case, reviewing evidence, planning his strategy. Detective Briggs and Officer Donnelly would testify. They would tell their version of what happened that day, and Monique would tell hers. The truth was somewhere in the Bodycam footage, in the 911 recording, in the testimony of witnesses. But truth and justice weren't always the same thing. She had learned that the hard way. February 24th, 2026, the day that would determine whether she was a victim or a criminal, whether her fear was justified or her resistance was unlawful. The bus pulled up and Monique climbed aboard, paying her fare with trembling hands that still bore the faint scars of that day on Maple Street. Her future hung in the balance, waiting for 12 strangers to decide what it all meant. A routine traffic stop for a rolling violation suddenly shifts from a tense exchange about compliance to a violent physical struggle involving a taser and a desperate 911 call from a woman pleading for help while still seated in her vehicle. The scene is set with Detective Anthony Briggs explaining a simple traffic violation, a failure to stop completely at an intersection. The atmosphere is initially professional, but grows increasingly tense when Monique Harris's hands begin trembling on the steering wheel and her voice becomes defensive. What starts as a standard request for license and registration transforms when the detective asks her to step out of the vehicle, a lawful command that Monique questions rather than obeys. Her passenger, Terrence Lewis, immediately complies and exits, but Monique freezes, her fear overriding her judgment. "Why do I need to get out?" she asks, her voice rising. "I didn't do anything wrong." The detective repeats the order. She refuses. Backup is called. Officer Paul Donnelly arrives, escalating the visible show of authority. Monique, now visibly shaking, pulls out her phone to call for help, narrating the encounter in real time while still seated in the driver's seat, one hand raised defensively, the other clutching the phone to her ear. The officers warn her repeatedly, this is a lawful order, not a request. Terrence pleads with her to comply. But Monique's distrust runs too deep, her fear too overwhelming. She believes compliance will lead to harm, not safety. "Ma'am, this is your final warning," Detective Briggs says, his voice firm. "Step out now, or you will be forcibly removed and arrested." "Please," she whispers into the phone, tears forming. "I'm so scared. They won't tell me why. I don't know what's happening." The officers move toward the door. Monique pulls back. And in that instant, a routine traffic stop transforms into a violent confrontation that will be recorded, shared, judged by millions, and fought over in a courtroom for months to come.